Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Nerdy Multiverse and yet another breakdown for Season 2 of The Bad Batch. Today, we will be breaking down the 4th episode, titled Faster. Starting the episode off, back on Ord Mantell, we see a Godel walking through the alleyways while eating a Milo Run fruit, which we have seen in different series, specifically being in the Rebel series quite a bit. And then we enter into Sid's place. We see Tech sitting at the bar playing some sabacc, which is of course the same sort of card-like game that Han Solo played to win over the Millennium Falcon, while Omega and Wrecker sit and play some Djarik, basically a Star Wars version of chess, of course being the same game that Chewbacca was playing on the Millennium Falcon in The New Hope. Winning the game of Djarik over Wrecker, Omega tells him that he owes her 2 things of Mantell mix, obviously named after the planet that they're on, Ord Mantell, and which we have seen the 2 snack on together before in the previous season, and this is basically the Star Wars equivalent to popcorn. Sid walks in and tells them to stop grinding up the power bill and then informs them that she has something for them to do, as the 3 will go with her on a run that she has to do, while Hunter and Echo are not present in this episode at all, as they are apparently on their own sort of mission, transporting Nerf nuggets. The 3 head with Sid and they fly to a different planet known as Safatoma. As we enter into this planet and see the group walking through the streets, we can see a ton of different alien species, such as Rhodians, Godels, and some Twi'leks. We can also see while they are walking through the streets a sign with different creature silhouettes on it, and one of these creature silhouettes is of a blurg, the same creature that we saw in The Mandalorian Season 1 when Kuel and Mandel were using them as mounts. Sid takes them to the front of the crowd where we see some more of the same alien species that I mentioned before, as well as some others such as a Bith, being the same species that are part of the Cantina bands, and we see a different assortment of speeders racing on a track, much like the pod racing bit from The Phantom Menace, but instead this is called riot racing, which may be the first time that this sort of racing is mentioned or shown in this universe. Sid has a droid known as Teo that is racing on the track that she is depending on to make her a lot of money. They go down to meet with Teo and fix up his speeder for him to race again. While they get the speeder fixed up and ready to race again, we can see some pit droids working on it, which of course have always been the type of droid on the sidelines of races like this to perform repairs to speeders or pods. We can also see that Teo is very prideful and cocky in his own skills to race and to win, which will end up being his own downfall. While talking about the race and whatnot, the group is approached by a Dawutin, which is a rare alien species and also the same species as the Inquisitor, the 9th sister, who the player in Cal Kestis fought against during the Fallen Order game. However, this Dawutin is known as Greenie Malegi, and he is accompanied by others, such as a Gamorrean who are known for guarding huts, specifically Jabba the Hutt, and most recently, guarding Boba Fett in the Book of Boba Fett. He is also accompanied by a Trandoshan, which is the same species as Bossk, and his prize racer Jet Venom, who is a Nasarian. Malegi wants to have his champion prize racer Jet Venom go up against Sid's, and Sid's is of course Teo, as they make a deal and get ready to race. On the track and during the race, we learn just how dangerous riot racing can be compared to the likes of pod racing, as in riot racing you are able to not only attack the other racers, but also use different weapons such as blasters, which not only poses a threat to the racers, but also the crowd, as we see one of the spectators in Arcona get blasted, and standing next to him is another Bith, as well as a Snivian. Sid keeps telling Teo not to take the left tunnel, and we hear this get mentioned and often warned about during the entirety of this episode, which ends up leading into the final arc and race. As Teo is closing in on Malegi's champion, Jet Venom, Malegi orders him to get Teo off of the track. As we can see, he has way more power over these racers, and not only has Jet Venom on the track, but another Nikto racer as well. The Nikto racer shoots a grapple mechanic onto Teo's speeder to hold him in place, while Jet Venom opens up a saw sort of tool to cut the front of Teo's speeder and shut it down, causing him to crash and lose the race, and ultimately lose the deal with Malegi. With the speeder nearly destroyed and Teo damaged as well, Sid is out of ideas and luck as she has lost the race, and Malegi will come to collect what is owed to him. Malegi comes out with his crew to collect, and they get in a short standoff before Omega tries to make a second deal with Malegi to race one more time. time, and if they lose, they will pay him double, but if they win, they get Sid, much like the deal that Qui-Gon made with Watto in The Phantom Menace. Agreeing to the deal, Malegi takes Sid as collateral, while the others try to get Teo back up and running to race one more time. Tech fixes up Teo, and we see the pit droids again, and while Tech talks about how Sid has had the group in this sort of trouble before, and it most likely will not be the last time, Tech is most likely referencing the time that Sid had the batch work with Roland Durand on a job and how that ended up turning out. This further gets built on when Malegi walks in and chats with Sid while having a drink. He says that this is for old times, showing that they most likely have worked together in the past, and Sid tells him that she has changed. But Malegi thinks otherwise and believes that the old Sid will eventually resurface, and this is a sort of theme that gets mentioned a few times during this episode, but more on that later. Tech studies the track and tells Teo that he has found the best route to go on for the course and the race, and Teo tries to call him a rookie, but before he can finish his sentence, he gets ran into by a racer and is completely destroyed. And Malegi walks out immediately after this happens, meaning that he could have orchestrated for this to happen, and tries to say that the deal is over, as there is technically a forfeit as Sid's racer is now out. But Tech says otherwise and volunteers to be the racer, putting the deal back on the table. Before the race starts, they introduce each of the racers just like they did before the pod racing in The Phantom Menace. Firstly, introducing Jet Venom, Malegi's champion and prized racer, then two Nikto racers, one of which we saw working with Malegi to take Teo out of the first race, as well as a painted commando droid, which we of course saw some of these droids in the last episode with Cody and Crosshair. Then introducing two protocol droids, and then what I think is the coolest or most interesting racer that they introduced is the protocol droid that has its head replaced with a B-1 battle droid. And if you remember the Battle of Geonosis from the Attack of the Clones, C-3PO had this exact same thing happen to himself. As the crowd heats up with the same species that we have seen and mentioned before within the crowd, as well as a visible Pantoran now, the race begins and immediately gets intense, with racers crashing into each other trying to get their opponents out of the race to win. With Jet Venom in the front in first place and Tech all the way in the back in the last place, the commando droid pushes up through the race and takes out one of the racers along the way. Tech says he needs more speed, playing into the title of the episode being faster, so he ends up disconnecting the weapons compartment from his speeder to gain more speed, which makes Wrecker, Omega, and Sid nervous and worried. Tech ends up using the setting he did on the track before Teo got ran over to have Omega pull up the information on the left tunnel. We hear that it was missing a part of the track, which is why the racers do not go through it, but it is also the shortest tunnel, so it would provide him an easier way to get ahead in the race. So Tech ends up deciding to go through this tunnel and gets to the other side way quicker than he normally would if he took the other two tunnels, while also technically taking out a racer that followed him through the left tunnel. Jet Venom and the other Nikto racer, both working for Malegi, have Tech in the middle of them and try to use the same tactic that they used on Teo earlier, shooting the grappler and using the reverse saw to get him out of the race and destroying his speeder. But Tech uses his intelligence and quick thinking to outmaneuver them, causing them to crash into one another, leaving the crowd in suspense as a cloud of dust covers the ending of the track, wondering who will come out victorious. With the suspense in place, Tech ends up speeding right through the finishing line and winning the race, in turn finishing up the deal they had made with Malegi. Omega and Wrecker end up going down to meet with Tech on the track before going to get Sid from Malegi, and the entire crowd begins cheering Tech's name, which could possibly hint or foreshadow at Tech eventually going on his own to live his own life, possibly as a racer instead of being a soldier. But we will have to wait and figure out his and the rest of the batch's fates, I suppose. Whether it happens all at once or one by one is what I'm wondering. Omega, Tech, and Wrecker go to Malegi to get Sid back after winning the race and the deal, and Malegi's crew are seemingly about to attack them, breaking the deal, but he ensures that a deal is a deal and he stops them, letting Sid go. Jet Venom obviously upset and butthurt that he not only lost the race and lost his championship, but lost to somebody who is basically a newcomer to all of this. So he almost grabs his blaster to fire on them, but Malegi stops him as well. And then Sid heads out, with the Bad Batch right behind her, but before the three leave, Malegi stops them and warns them of Sid, and how their loyalty is admirable, but with Sid it does not always go both ways, hinting at and possibly foreshadowing Sid Sid ratting out the Batch, most likely to the Empire, as she may be forced to choose between them or herself and her business, which would in turn lead Crosshair and Rampart to catching on to the Batch and hunting them down. Wrecker, Tech, and Omega hear this, but don't take it to too much concern as of right now and head out behind Sid, as the last shot is a zooming out shot of the Riot Racing track, which is where the episode ends off. A pretty fun episode that had a lot of nostalgia to it, with the Riot Racing reminding me a lot of the pod racing from the Phantom Menace, but definitely a step down compared to the last episode, but that is to be expected. This episode did not push too much when it came to the overall story, although it did possibly hint at some things to come in the future for the Batch, specifically tying in with Sid, and I feel as if she got the most out of this episode over anybody with the development and that sort of stuff. I wouldn't be too shocked if you consider this a filler sort of episode, as it could definitely be considered that type. But overall, I think it was definitely a fun episode and entry with a lot of nostalgia in it. I did enjoy it, but if I had to give it a rating, I think I would give it around a 6 or 7 out of 10, as it was enjoyable, but not too much development for the storyline or characters, like I said previously. I hope that you enjoyed the episode as well, but make sure to leave your thoughts on it down below. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed our breakdown on this episode, don't forget to give it a like. And with that being said, we will see you all the next time that we go through and explore the nerdy multiverse.